What are we going to do with this? Well, I want to go through the story again and explore the images of God that are presented within the text of Job. Now notice I said images, plural. Because one of the first things we find when we look at the book of Job is that there isn't just one image, there are many. And an obvious question that would arise from this, or response that might come when you hear this, is which is the true one? Which is the correct image? Which is the God who really is? And there's no real good answer to that question, as we'll see. And I don't really think that should surprise us terribly much, because I would define an image as a human-made thing, a constructed object. It's a human attempt to describe that which is ineffable, that which is indescribable. So we should not be surprised that various attempts to capture the inner nature and essence of God should be diffuse, should be different. God and his nature refracts in a number of different directions in the book of Job. So not one image, but many images, and I would probably think that I'd be surprised if that wasn't that case, because of the indescribable, the ineffable, the infinite character of God as we understand him. I'm going to pick 4 images of God in the book of Job that are produced by the various narrative voices in the book. I then want to show how these images might inform our present theological discussion. And as I was preparing this, one of the first things that occurred to me is that you might respond to me, well, I don't really have any theological discussions. And in fact, I believe we do, all of us. So let me define what I mean by theological discussion. A theological discussion is any time when we seek to make causal connections between various things that happen in the universe, that happen to us. Why does something, any question with a why, any big question with a why, ultimately comes down to a theological discussion. Questions such as, why did this person die of cancer? That's a theological question. Why did this marriage break up? That's a theological question. What is death? What is life? Those are theological questions. I believe very strongly that the images of God as depicted in the book of Job will significantly inform our theological inquiries. Images of God in Job. Now I want to go over the 4 of them in detail. There's no necessary order to these 4. I'm certainly not running through the order in the book. In fact, they appear throughout the book, although they come out more strongly in some parts as opposed to others. So I will be localizing the images in a particular scene of the 4 scenes that I mentioned earlier. The first image of God presented in the book of Job is found most significantly in Yahweh's defense of his actions before Job, what I think we called scene 3. And this image of God I call God the Majestic Thunderer. God makes 2 assertions to Job during his defense, and I want to concentrate on the first one now, the second one a little bit down the line. The first assertion, God can do anything, we are told, while Job, a mere mortal, can do very little. I want to read some portions to illustrate my point. I will give you the references, and you might want to write them down. Don't worry about it. The first one comes from chapter 38, verses 4 through 7. God says, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Speak if you have understanding. Do you know who fixed its dimensions, or who measured it with a line? Who set its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the divine beings shouted for joy? Where were you?" The answer is, Job was nowhere. Job hadn't even been born. Job hadn't even come close to being born when all those things happened. Who was there? God was there. God was there. God, the Majestic Thunderer. This is from chapter 38, verses 34 through 38. Can you send up an order to the clouds for an abundance of water to cover you? Can you dispatch the lightning on a mission and have it answer you, I am ready? And Job, of course, has to answer, no, I can't do any of those things. Who can do those things? God, the Majestic Thunderer. This God also works with sustaining nature, the wild animals, the beasts of the field, chapter 39, verses 5 through 6. Who sets the wild ass free? Who loosens the bonds of the donkey? Whose home have I made in the wilderness, the salt land his dwelling place? And the answer is, God did those things. So the picture of God, the Majestic Thunderer, is a powerful God, is a, good word, fecund God, a God who is a source of fertility, a God who brings forth the rain, a God who cherishes and takes care of all the animals, a God who watches over his creation from a position of power, of strength, of fearsome energy, a God who engenders respect and fear, or at least he should. Second image of God found in the book of Job. I call this one God the Enforcer. This one should be quite familiar to some of us because parents present this picture of God to us all the time. God the Enforcer is a way to get people to do things that you want them to do. In the second scene in the book, where Job's friends are arguing with him, they present God, they understand God as an enforcer of rigid moral law. The law which is so inexorable and so inflexible and so invariable that it could be compared to the law of gravity. There is nothing that can resist the forces which attract two bodies with mass together. And I've just exhausted the sum of my knowledge of science here, so I better not go any further. The moral law as sure and as certain as the law of gravity. What moral law is this that God enforces? I could say it in one sentence. Good people are rewarded for their good behavior. Bad people are punished. Ever heard that before? We all have. In fact, this particular moral principle, this particular idea, has been the foundation for, certainly for Israelite civilization, and it may even be argued for most of Western civilization as well. Good people are rewarded for their good behavior. Bad people are punished. Eliphaz, one of Job's friends, in chapter 4, verses 8 through 9, says, "As I have seen, those who plow evil and sow mischief reap them. They perish by a blast from God. They're gone at the breath of his nostrils." There's one problem with this moral idea. Almost always it gets carried one step further. People say more than just that God rewards good behavior and punishes evil behavior. They reverse it and say, if somebody is in a position of success and blessedness, they are thereby good. That's the proof. Donald Trump, he must be a good person. Look how rich he is. And then you get some poor homeless bag lady walking down the street, and you think to yourself, have you ever wondered this? What is the flaw in her character? What is her moral problem that brought her to such a condition? That's where this idea of God the Enforcer almost always goes. The friends of Job, they don't argue from Job's behavior that Job is a bad person. They can't point to anything that Job did and say, look, you did this that was so horrible, that was so disgusting, that was so reprehensible, and that's why all these things happened to you. They can't argue that. All they can really say is, look how much you're suffering. You must have done something terrible. Just wonder, brief aside here, not exactly part of my outline, but what if that isn't true? What if the only difference between you and some homeless person whose body is covered with sores, carrying all their worldly possessions in a shopping basket, what if the only difference between you and them were a set of circumstances? What if it had nothing to do with the fact that you are a moral person and come from a moral household, and that they're some kind of a sickening, pathetic degenerate? What if only circumstances keep you from becoming utterly a failure at life? The worst alcoholic or criminal. It's something to think about anyway. Do you believe that God as you understand him is God the enforcer? Or are there other alternatives? There are some implications to this particular picture of God. One of them is that this particular deity invariably supports the status quo, the way things are, and is always on the side of the rich and the powerful. Unfortunately, this particular theologizing, this particular imaging of God has often produced some of the most violent and oppressive manifestations of religion that we've ever experienced. When people believe that God invariably rewards the good and punishes the evil, and makes the connection that the poor people must be evil and the rich people must be good, it almost inevitably produces the most horribly repressive, dictatorial, dehumanizing societies that one could ever imagine. As I mentioned earlier, parents often use this to get their kids to do what they want to do. If you don't listen to me, God is going to get you for it. Maybe they don't say it quite that way, but it's implied in many of the things. Let's recap. 2 images. God, the Majestic Thunderer, powerful commander of respect, sustainer of the universe. God, the Enforcer, inflexible determiner of the moral law, rewarding good and punishing evil. I don't want to tell you what I call the 3rd image just yet. I want to bring you into it slowly so you don't drive me out of here with sticks.